Hey creatives, and welcome to another video. So, I have done movie reviews on my channel before because I'm not much of a book reader, although I have read books and I have reviewed a few. I'm a big movie watcher, and that's where a lot of my inspiration for my books come from. So I decided, since I've been adding in my writer react videos on Fridays, I would insert my writer reacts and reviews videos onto Fridays as well. So today I'm going to be reacting and reviewing to The Meg 2, The Trench, I think is what it's called. We went to see that. We just got home from that and grocery shopping, so it's really fresh in my mind. So this is my honest review. Let's dive into this. Pun intended. No, I didn't intend that pun. That was funny. That was a good coincidence. Okay, so first of all, this is the second movie to The Meg. The first movie, The Meg, was about this big megalodon that gets free. I don't remember all the gritty details, but it's a really good movie. I felt like it was really innovative. I felt like we hadn't gotten a really good heavy-handed shark movie since 47 Meters Down and 47 Meters Down 2. And then before that, obviously, Jaws was the big one. So this was the second movie. It was a sequel. And so, yeah, the first movie was really innovative for shark movies. I felt like it was really cool. I loved it. It did a bunch of new stuff. So this movie, my overall thoughts on it was that it's a good movie and I love it, mostly because I'm a sucker for big monster movies, attack movies that has to do with a creature, and shark attack movies and stuff like that. I'm a super big sucker for monster movies, and by monster, big monsters, or even just, you know, monsters in general. However, I firmly believe that you and me and people as an audience can love a movie and still acknowledge that it's a bad movie or that it has issues and is written poorly. It wasn't written poorly, but this movie was so unrealistic. It stretched the limits of believability. Usually with monster movies, you have a little bit of unrealism to make the situations work, especially with monsters, because in reality, predators are just trying to eat. And so if it's not going to feed them, if it's too much work, they usually take the path of least resistance. So if they're going to get attacked, they know if they're wounded, they can't get food. So if it's not worth their time, their effort, or their wounds or whatever, they will give up. Typically, that's not always the case, but they're not just like evil with the purpose of being evil. So with monster movies, you have to kind of justify that or blur the lines of reality a little bit. This was a little bit too much. Like I said, I loved the movie. It was really great. It had some fantastic action sequences. I loved the plot line. I loved the characters. I will just acknowledge the fact that it was completely unrealistic a lot of the time. So let's talk about this. This will be a spoiler review. Sort of. So if you don't want to know anything about this movie, then go watch it and then come watch this. But if you're interested to know a few details, I'm not going to spoil the plot or anything because there's a lot of twists in this one. But I will be talking about some of the action sequences and the unrealistic parts. So if you don't want to know anything, just click away. But it's not like huge spoilers. So first of all, this had a similar problem that the latest and final Jurassic World movie did, which was that when I come to a monster movie, I want to watch monster scenes. I'm not coming there for a thriller like 007 or, you know, Taken or anything like that. Like, I'm man versus nature, man versus monster. That's what I care about. So when they add in an extra conflict that's like humans versus humans, it's like the wrong genre for me. Now I'm not saying like there's still a good plot there. There's still a lot of good action sequences. It's just I'm coming in with the intention of watching a monster movie, not a thriller. If I knew and came into it thinking, okay, I was going to have a lot more man versus man here, that would be fine. But so that was one thing. And then the other thing that was the big problem, so the unrealism, the lack of, like, it wasn't as focused on the monster as I would have hoped, kind of like I felt like with the Jurassic World movie. And then so the unrealism, that, and then the Hollywood problem, which is the fact that Hollywood is so, I don't know if this was filmed in Hollywood, but just movies today are so cut and paste. They are so unoriginal. Nobody has any new ideas anymore. Like, I know there are writers out there that have good ideas, so start getting those writers to come in and do stuff because it's starting to get really cut and paste. The concept of a person training a dangerous monster and kind of having a bond with it, that is so cliche at this point. The concept of one monster eating and taking care of another monster that was the problem. So like you always have in every, like Godzilla starting to do it, Kong a little bit was starting to do it, which I love that franchise. But Jurassic World is really overworking that, where it's always the T-Rex versus another big monster, and the T-Rex always wins. And so this movie had a little bit of that problem, which I'm not going to tell you or spoil that, but it did have a monster versus monster situation-ish, which was awesome, but like it's still so cut and paste from everything else in this genre. So the trainer, the concept of a man training a monster type situation, that was also in Jurassic World, really overdone, so like everybody can just stop the dinosaurs with like raising your hand or whatever. So there was a little bit of that in it. And then there was a lot of unrealistic situations. Now I'm still saying all of this. It sounds like it's a negative review and it sounds like I'm complaining, but I still believe you can really enjoy a book or a movie or a franchise and still acknowledge the problems that it has. I don't mind that, and it's still, like, you can still like it. It's still kind of a guilty pleasure. Like, you could like it despite of its problems. Just like I actually do enjoy the Twilight franchise. Sue me, all right? I know it's bad writing. I still like it, all right? Whatever. So some of the unrealistic situations were as follows. They're deep in the Mariana Trench, not spoiling the plot line, but for one reason or another, one of the characters has to swim out. And this whole time they've been in subs. They have these suits that they were using that can stand the pressure down there. And then something happens, they can't use it, and one character has to go out and swim. And they have this quote scientific explanation for it, that if he forces air out of his one of his cavities, he'll be fine for about 60 seconds, which is coincidentally just long enough for him to do what he needs to do. But it's like the pressure down there would just make you pop, like you would just combust. There is no surviving that, no matter how you try to frame it. That's why you have the subs, that's why you have the suits, which is still fine because it's a sci-fi, so they have the technology to withstand them there, even though realistically we technically don't really have the technology to stand that kind of pressure down there. Because that's even way deeper than the Titanic, and we all know what recently has happened with the Titanic situation, so that was one unrealistic thing. There was one scene where one of the bad guys is in a helicopter, and they tell the pilot to go check out what's going on when they know they have seen that there's the attacks happening and whatnot. And instead of telling the pilot to take off so that you could be safe and not get eaten, you tell the pilot to leave the helicopter, which means you're in there alone, just so that we could have that particular villain get eaten. It was really unrealistic. I was like, okay, you would just take off. And then the other problem was the concept, like I said, when you're doing a monster movie, you have to justify the monster acting evilly and attacking everybody. There has to be a justification for it. So I think in Rampage, I can't remember the plot line, but there's like a very specific reason why the monsters are rampaging. Planet of the Apes kind of did that a little bit, where they were angry and trying to overthrow humanity. They were growing in intelligence. And then you have like Godzilla and Kong and all of those different apex predators. They're like competing for dominance and stuff, so it makes sense. But in this one, it's like just a predator being a predator, and there are several moments where it's like the easier path to getting the biggest meal or the best meal to survive is not what the monster is doing and stuff. There's one particular circumstance where there's the megalodon attacking a beach full of hundreds of people, and one of the characters is like, I'll lead it away, and the sharks just decide to turn and chase that one guy. But it's like, why would they chase the one person when that's one person? And by the way, this is a megalodon, which is huge, so we're like a chip to them. Like it's like a potato chip. We're not a meal. It's not gonna fill us up. It's not going to fill up the shark. And yet they left the beach where there's hundreds of people where you could get more food. It doesn't make any sense. So there was that. But again, I still love it anyway. I'm just saying it's unrealistic. And then this is a minor spoiler, but there were 3 megalodons and they were working together, which in real life, according to what we think happened with real megalodons, is they were very solitary creatures and they ate each other. Because obviously, big giant thing, fight each other and you get food. So the fact that they would turn to humans, which are very tiny in comparison to like a megalodon, to eat doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But I really love the characters. I really love the development of the characters. They did a lot of really good things with the character development. There was one scene in the sub, and this, again, isn't a spoiler. They're kind of talking back and forth, and some of the side characters that have been introduced are new characters to us. And one of them is like, one of the ladies was teasing this guy, like, oh, you keep toys in your sub? And he's like, they're not toys, they're action figures. And they're teasing him, and they're like, so you actually go to Comic-Cons? And he's like, and they're like, do you dress up? And he's like, yes, I do. And it was like a playful banter so that we kind of understood his character just from those few scenes that were just lines that were expertly put in there. And like, I'm just like, that's so good, because we have a feel, we now know who this character is, what he's about, his personality, everything kind of came out in those few scenes, and they were very, very short lines that really did well to show his character. The uncle is I love the uncle. He's amazing. I obviously love Jason Statham, I think his name is. He's the main hero. I like that the daughter's a little older now. I really liked the plot line, and I did like the man versus man plot line in this one. I'm not going to spoil anything at all, but there is a couple twists in there that I don't think I saw either one of them coming. It was kind of a surprise to me. So that was nice. And again, the plot line itself was really good. There was a lot of good action sequences. There was some action sequences that were serious but also funny. There's one in particular with the uncle and this other guy and a helicopter and some other things that I won't talk about. And that was a fantastic sequence. It was a good action sequence, but it also had humor. And honestly, I love a good action sequence, but I also love when the action itself is funny, because I don't like humor interrupting the seriousness of situations, and that's why I don't care for Marvel, because it's just humor that doesn't fit, but that's a Marvel rant. But in action sequences, if you can do kind of a funny action sequence that makes you laugh but also still contains the seriousness of the situation, I like that. Like, that's really, really good. I can't think of a really good example off the top of my head. Editing Joanna here. I just had to pop in and say that I did think of an example as I was editing and I couldn't resist. So one example of this is in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Indiana and his father gets captured, and so they're tied up to chairs back to back, and they're trying to get out of the chairs, and I think like one of them gets a lighter and tries to light the ropes on fire, and the dad drops it, and the floor gets lit on fire, and he goes and he's trying to blow it out, and he's, Indiana's like, Dad, and they're like, they hop in the chair into the fireplace, and the fireplace turns, and then it shows them in a room with Nazis, and they're like freaking out. The Nazis don't notice, and it turns back to the room, but it's like all on fire now, so it's either face the Nazis or the fire. It's an action scene, so it's still action-packed, it's still really good, it's still serious, you're still like, oh my gosh, are they gonna escape? But it's really humorous at the same time, so it works because it blends the seriousness with the action itself humor. Like, the action is the humor, as opposed to a character saying a line that really doesn't make sense and isn't really funny anyway, like Marvel does. But that was just my example, so back to my video. I wish I could, but I can't. But that sequence was with the uncle, the other guy, and the helicopter situation. That was great. So overall, I loved this movie. I did like the first one better. But usually that's how it goes with sequels. I did feel like they're starting to copy and paste a little bit too much, so I think that if they threw in a few original ideas, it could work. There was a couple new monsters introduced, which I won't spoil, but those were exciting. I loved it. Those really cool sequences. And then they opened it up for a third one, which could be potentially cool and interesting. Maybe, I don't know if they've set it up for a third one or not. It could, which, knowing Hollywood and like the movie industry these days, where it's like everything is from a franchise or a book or an unoriginal idea, it's probably gonna be a third one. But I really liked it. I enjoyed it. I still rate it, like, in terms of my enjoyment, I would still give it about 4.5 stars. Unrealistically, if you add in the unrealism, the copy and pasted concepts that's repeated in other monster movie franchises within this genre, and then some of the other issues like that, I would say it's probably like a 3-star movie for me. If you add in all those other problems, but I can still acknowledge the problems and enjoy the movie. So that's my review and reaction to The Meg 2, The Trench. I still really loved it. Again, enjoyment level 4.5, 5 stars. Like, it was still really fun to watch, especially in theaters. So If you guys liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more writing and reading videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. In the meantime, check out my review of The Little Mermaid live action. I watched it and I reviewed it, so I give you all of my thoughts and insights onto that one, so check out that review. You don't want to miss it.